Today, Washington erupts as Jasmine Crockett storms a Capitol hearing armed with 1,600 riot pardons, an FBI report of a 41% spike in political violence, and a secret recording of a killer screaming "Trump told us to fight." In front of 330 million Americans, she slams Trump with a line that slices like a blade. Your mouth loads the gun, America buries the dead. Every gavel strike detonates like a bomb, shaking the walls while Trump hurls insults, liar, witch, traitor, only to be drowned by gasps and lev polling flashing across the screens. The evidence piles higher, the tension cuts. Today, the Capitol hearing chamber glares like a furnace, banks of white-hot lights, lenses stacked on tripods like artillery, boom mix dangling overhead as an emergency session ignites just hours after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Reporters elbow for angles, chyron bars scream breaking across every network, while a countdown clock blinks at the rear wall, daring someone to flinch first. Security lines the aisles in that black, visors down, earpieces whispering, a human perimeter around a nation's raw nerve. The air smells of coffee and cordite anticipation so sharp it could cut a suit. Jasmine Crockett enters not alone but flanked by nurses in scrubs, veterans with medals clinking softly, and immigrant workers still wearing their name badges. A procession that looks less like politics and more like a vow. She carries a slim black binder and a burnished gavel engraved with names, tiny, precise letters that glint like stars under the lights. 3 red tag exhibits ride the cart behind her. Exhibit A, 41% threat spike. Exhibit B, 1,600 pardons. Exhibit C, audio, he told us to fight. The gallery hushes as if the room itself has lungs and has just remembered to breathe. Across the aisle, Donald Trump sits back in the witness chair with the practiced calm of someone who treats the camera like an old friend and the truth like a rival. He smirks, then smooths an invisible crease on his lapel, and every micro-expression is captured, magnify, mend in real time. Behind him, aides cradle manila folders stamp privilege and confidential and exchange notes the way gamblers flick chips. A single empty chair at his table bears a folded 10-card witness like a dare to fate to fill it. A murmur ripples through the press row. A courier arrives late, with a steel gray USB sealed in evidence tape, and the bailiff signs for it with a pen that trembles. On the far balcony, a figure in a navy cap watches without blinking, jotting symbols instead of words. A marshal drifts that way, casual and not at all casual. Someone whispers sealed affidavit and someone else hisses encrypted chat logs, and for a moment the whole balcony leans forward as if pulled by a hidden magnet. The gavel rests under Jasmine's fingertips like thunder waiting for a sky. Cameras swivel to the screen as it flickers. The opening slide is a heat map of threats glowing angry red across swing states, dots pulsing as if sensed to a single, malignant heartbeat. Jasmine doesn't look at the map, she looks at the people behind it, the nurse twisting her wedding ring, the veteran standing too straight to hide the limp, the janitor in a faded Union jacket who nods once and doesn't blink again. She opens the binder to a page titled Convergence of Speech and Harm, and the microphone catches the thin scissor sound of paper. Somewhere in the rafters outside, sirens comb the avenues. Inside, the country crowds itself into a single room, a single hour, a single yes or no. The clerk raises a hand for silence that never comes. Only the edge of it arrives, serrated, buzzing, as if the power grid has learned to feel. Jasmine inhales, a quiet, measured breath that fills the chamber more than the lights ever could. Can a single hearing pierce a wall of power built on fear? The gavel cracks once, a single detonation that ricochets through marble and marrow. Jasmine Crockett steps into the sound like a fighter entering a ring, binder open to the first page of a war she's prepared to name. Her voice slices clean through the static of cameras and coughs. Mr. Trump, your words have not merely divided this country, they have weaponized language into bullets. Every rally chant, every midnight post, every wink at violence is a loaded magazine aimed at the heart of America. Gasps ripple across the gallery as the phrase lands, sharp enough to draw blood. The veterans behind her stiffen as if bracing for impact, while the immigrant workers lean forward, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and vindication. Trump leans into his microphone, a slow smirk spreading like an oil slick across his face. Spare me the sermon, he sneers, voice low and deliberate. You're a Democrat puppet, a pathetic climber who needs my name to stay relevant. Without me, you're a footnote. If that, laughter erupts from a pocket of red-hatted supporters in the gallery. The bailiff steps forward but Jasmine doesn't flinch. Instead, She tilts her head, eyes narrowing to a scalpel's edge, and replies, "If relevance requires burying the truth beneath applause, I'd rather be a footnote than a foot soldier in your cult of chaos." Reporters hunch over their devices, thumbs flying as hashtags ignite across the digital sky. Hashtag words kill, hashtag Trumplethalams, hashtag Crockett vs. Trump. Screens outside the Capitol light up with real-time polls. Within minutes, millions are voting on whether political speech should be prosecuted when it incites violence. Trump scoffs, his voice rising a notch. "You and your fake FBI numbers 41%, my ass. You can print lies on glossy slides, but America knows a witch hunt when it sees one." He jabs a finger toward Jasmine, to gesture half accusation, half performance, and the cameras catch the vein pulsing at his temple. Jasmine flips a page, revealing a fresh set of sealed affidavits marked threat level, severe, and the clerk instinctively steps back as if the paper itself carries heat. She leans closer, her words dropping one by one like lead weights into a deep well. 41% is not a number. It is hospitals on lockdown. It is children ducking under desks. It is funerals streamed because congregations are too afraid to gather. Outside the Capitol, night refuses to settle even though the sky is dark. Floodlights cut across a sea of faces holding candles at gutter and flare in the late summer wind. Nurses still in scrubs stand shoulder to shoulder with veterans in dress blues, their breath misting against banners that read words "Kill and Truth Counts." Across the barricades, MAGA loyalists chant back with crimson signs and clench fists, the two crowds separated by little more than steel rails and a tremor of rage. News drones hover above like metallic vultures, beaming the standoff to every phone and television in the country. In Detroit, a black family sits on a worn leather couch, the glow of the screen painting their faces with cold blue light. A grandmother clutches a Bible while her teenage grandson scrolls through real-time death threats posted under Jasmine Crockett's name. Each refresh brings a new spike of hate. In El Paso, a Latino father keeps one hand on the remote and the other on his daughter's shoulder as she whispers, "They could come for us too, right?" He doesn't answer, eyes locked on the image of Trump jabbing his finger across the witness table. In rural Iowa, a conservative farmer wipes soil from his palms, leans against a chipped kitchen counter, and shakes his head as the FBI threat map glows blood red over counties he once thought were safe. The camera cuts to a candlelight vigil on the University of Utah campus, where Charlie Kirk once gave a speech. Students form a ring around an empty podium draped in black, phones raised like lanterns, while a classmate breaks down mid-sentence. He just wanted to debate ideas, now he's a statistic on a chart. The microphone catches the soft sob of a mother clutching her son's baseball cap. She fears her child will be the next name in a headline, her voice barely rising above the hush. Who's protecting us if leaders profit from the violence? The feed jumps back to the hearing room where Jasmine taps a finger on the gavel, each tap echoing through millions of living rooms as if it were striking their own tables. Hashtag search, hashtag stop the blood, hashtag Crockett strikes back, hashtag Trump lit the flames, turning comment sections into battlegrounds of fury and disbelief. Across the nation, hearts pound in sync with every revelation, every insult, every threat of escalation. In the tension between candlelight and camera flash, between prayer and riot, a single question rises like smoke and refuses to disperse. How much violence must America endure before someone dares to draw the line? The chamber plunges into a tense half-dark as the giant monitor flickers awake, bathing the marble walls in a cold digital glow. A senior FBI analyst steps forward, badge glinting beneath the lights, and begins to speak with the clipped precision of someone who has stared too long into the abyss. "Since January," she says, "political violence threats have surged 41% in the 48 hours following each major Trump rally." The number detonates through the room like a silent explosion. Reporters stiffen, fingers frozen above keyboards. Even the red-hatted loyalists in the gallery stop chanting long enough to breathe. A second agent cues a series of encrypted chat transcripts, the kind of messages the public never sees. Lines of jagged text appear across the screen. "He told us to fight. Target blue states first. Make them afraid to vote." Each phrase is tagged with GPS metadata, each sender traced to a city now glowing on a threat map, at pulses like a living wound. Jasmine leans into her microphone, voice low but surgical. "These are not slogans. They are instructions." She lets the silence stretch until it becomes a pressure in the chest, then adds, Instructions followed by real bullets, real funerals, real children hiding under desks. The analyst continues, scrolling to financial graphs showing fundraising spikes in the hours after each violent incident. The pattern is consistent, he says. The rhetoric escalates, the threats rise, the donations surge. Trump shifts in his chair, lips tightening, and for the first time the cameras catch the faint tremor in his hand. He tries a laugh, a practiced chuckle that dies in the static of the room. Jasmine doesn't give him space to recover. 41% isn't a partisan talking point, she says, eyes locked on him. It's the sound of hospitals preparing trauma bays, the smell of candle wax at midnight vigils, the weight of body bags we are running out of names for. The monitor now displays a heat map bleeding crimson across the Midwest, every red dot a threat credible enough to trigger federal alerts. Viewers across the country watch the dots multiply in real time, an electronic heartbeat that refuses to slow. A mother in Detroit clutches her child closer. A farmer in Iowa wipes sweat from his palms though the room is cold. The agent pauses on the final slide, a direct quote from a suspect in the Kirk shooting. "I believe the president wanted action, so I acted." The chamber holds its breath. Numbers don't blink, and neither does Jasmine as she delivers the line that cuts deeper than any statistic. These are not coincidences. They are consequences. She lets the words hang like a verdict, then turns toward the cameras, her voice a quiet dare to a restless nation. Numbers don't lie, but will America believe them before the next trigger is pulled? The chamber lights dim to a bruised violet as the first reel blazes across the 30-foot screen, Trump's face filling the room larger than life. Grainy footage from a rally in Michigan erupts with his unmistakable bark, "Fight like hell, or you won't have a country anymore." The crowd on the recording roars like a stadium on fire. Bass from the speakers rattles, a marble columns, until it feels as if the Capitol itself is shaking. Another clip snaps into place. Georgia. Late night, his voice sharper, taunting. "Stand back and stand by." Gasps ripple through the gallery. Some of Trump's supporters attempt a laugh, but it dies in their throats as the volume rises and the echoes overlap, turning his slogans into a cacophony of command. Jasmine stands perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the screen, letting the words hang until they become a physical pressure in the chest. "Mr. Trump," she says finally, each syllable measured like a scalpel, "these are not metaphors. These are marching orders. Do you deny it that your rallies fuel the threats we just heard in the FBI data?" Trump leans toward his mic, the trademark grin stretched too thin to hide the twitch in his jaw. "Fake news theater," he snaps, waving a hand toward the screen as if swatting a fly. Clips taken out of context by desperate Democrats, but the cameras betray him. Both fists clench on the table, knuckles blanching white, a slow tremor traveling from shoulder to wrist. Jasmine notices, and so does every viewer watching from living rooms and vigils across the country. She steps closer, lowering her voice so the microphones capture every edge. "Context," she repeats. "Tell the families of the dead what context makes fight like hell a harmless phrase. Tell the students who bury their classmates what context makes stand back and stand by an invitation to tea instead of a call to arms." The next reel plays, without warning, cell phone footage from the night of the Capitol riot, rioters chanting Trump's slogans verbatim as windows shatter behind them. A bailiff instinctively moves toward the witness table as if proximity to the footage might spark violence in the room itself. Trump tries to speak again, but the audio of his own voice drowns him out, overlapping chants folding into the screams of police radios. Jasmine lets the chaos play a beat longer, then turns back to him, eyes like sharpened steel. Words ignite crowds. "Mr. Trump, you lit the fuse and then sold tickets to the fire." The gallery holds a collective breath, the silence now electric, waiting for a reply that cannot wash the blood from syllables. Outside, sirens wail and screens across America flicker with hashtags surging like a second storm. Jasmine leans into the microphone one last time, her voice steady as a trigger pull. "When words become weapons, who holds the trigger, those who shout them, or those who obey?" The monitors flare again, this time not with rally footage but with a dizzying torrent of screenshots pulled from the endless scroll of Twitter analytics. A forensic analyst from the FBI steps to the podium, her gloved fingers flicking across a tablet as streams of posts cascade onto the massive screen. Memes of rifles wrapped in American flags, countdown timers labeled Judgment Day, doctored videos of Jasmine superimposed with crosshairs. Each image carries a watermark of the platform that hosted it, each timestamped an indictment. A new slide appears, a post from Elon Musk's own account only hours after the Kirk shooting. "The left is the real murder party." Gasps ripple through the chamber like a sudden gust. Even seasoned reporters forget to type. Another analyst overlays the post with engagement numbers. 12 million views in 3 hours, 480,000 shares, 97,000 comments, a wildfire of rage quantified in cold metrics. Jasmine steps forward, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet. "These are not accidents," she says, eyes sweeping the gallery. "This is an industry. Hate is being monetized like gasoline sold by the gallon. Every click another spark, every share another gallon poured onto an already burning country." She points to a graph where revenue climbs in perfect rhythm with spikes of violent threats, the curve rising like a scar across the nation's timeline. Trump shifts in his seat, eyes darting to the slide that pairs his rally dates with the platform's profit surges. The coincidence is so precise it feels like fate sharpening a knife. Another clip plays, a private chatroom where extremist leaders trade memes of assault rifles and quote Trump's words as captions. "Fight like hell, sale ends when freedom dies," one meme reads, accompanied by links to gun suppliers and crypto donation addresses. The analyst pauses, a final reel, a network diagram mapping thousands of coordinated bot accounts, arrows of influence fanning out from a handful of verified profiles that profit each time outrage spikes. The room tightens as Jasmine delivers her next line with surgical calm. Every retweet is a breadcrumb leading to another funeral. Every algorithm that rewards fury writes the next headline before the next shot is fired. Her words hang in the chilled air like smoke, heavy enough to taste. Cameras zoom on Musk's post again, the engagement counter still climbing in real time, proof that outrage never sleeps. Trump mutters First Amendment under his breath, but the microphones catch it, and a murmur of disgust rolls through the chamber like a low thunder. Jasmine leans closer to the mic, eyes hard enough to spark against steel. "Speech is free," she says, "but blood is not. Someone is paying for this violence and someone is cashing the check." The gallery falls into a silence so sharp it feels like the moment before a detonation. She lets it breathe, then locks her gaze on the cameras broadcasting to millions and asks the question that can no longer be avoided. Should the tech giants, who profit from every death threat, be held accountable for the blood spilled by their clicks? The double doors at the rear of the chamber swing open without warning, the hinges screaming like a sudden siren. Heads whip around as a lone figure steps into the flood of camera light, a leather case clutched tight against her chest. For a heartbeat the room freezes, as if the oxygen has been siphoned away, then a collective gasp ripples through the crowd. Mary Trump. The president's estranged niece, the one who once promised she would never set foot in this building again. She moves with deliberate calm, her black coat snapping in the air-conditioned draft, eyes fixed on the witness table where her uncle sits blinking against the glare. In her hand 'tis a folder sealed with thick crimson tape and stamped classified family records. A sight so unexpected that even the seasoned reporters momentarily forget to type. The bailiff intercepts her at the center aisle, but Mary lifts the folder just high enough for the cameras to catch the seal before surrendering it to the clerk. Microphones hiss as photographers surge forward, lenses clicking like a swarm of insects feeding on history. Jasmine watches from the dais, one eyebrow arched in quiet recognition. This was the missing witness whose name had been kept off the docket until the last second. Mary approaches the microphone, voice steady but carrying the weight of decades. "My uncle is not merely reckless," she begins, the words slicing through the charged air. "He is an architect of political cruelty." Gasps break like a wave across the gallery. Even Trump's own attorneys lean back as though the statement itself might draw blood. Mary continues, unveiling a pattern of private conversations, family memos, and late-night calls that trace the blueprint of a man who learned early to weaponize fear. "He once told me," she says, "that chaos is leverage, that if people are scared enough, they'll do anything you ask." A hush spreads as the clerk lays the sealed documents on the evidence table, the crimson tape glowing under the lights like a warning flare. Trump shifts in his chair, the trademark smirk faltering for the first time, his jaw tightening as he mutters something the microphones can't quite catch. Jasmine leans forward, eyes locking on Mary with a flicker of gratitude and challenge, sensing the gravity of family testimony posed to pierce the armor that statistics and graphs could not breach. Across the nation, Millions watch the feed with hearts pounding. Detroit kitchens, Texas living rooms, Iowa farmhouses, all drawn into the intimate spectacle of kinship turned tribunal. Mary places a final photo on the table. A young Donald beside a stack of unpaid workers' invoices, his smile caught in the flash like a predator startled mid-hunt. The chamber holds its breath as she closes her case and speaks the line that will replay in headlines before the RNs. If you want to know what created tonight's violence, look not to strangers or enemies, look to the family that taught him fear was power. Mary adjusts the microphone, the sealed folder now open before her like a surgical tray. The chamber leans in, drawn by the gravitational pull of family secrets about to be spoken aloud. Her voice carries the steadiness of a practiced therapist and the bite of someone who has lived too long in a house built on intimidation. I grew up watching my uncle treat cruelty as courtesy, she begins, eyes never leaving Donald's face. Fear was the only language that earned respect at our dinner table. Cameras catch Trump stiffening, his lips pressed into a bloodless line, as if the words themselves were tiny blades. She slides a photo across the table. Christmas Eve at the Queen's estate, Donald mid-laugh, a teenage Mary shrinking in the corner. He would brag, she says, about how humiliation keeps people obedient. He called it breaking the horse. Gasps tremble through the chamber. Then she opens a handwritten memo dated the night of the Paul Pelosi attack. In her careful, even tone she reads aloud. Funny thing about hammers, sometimes they land where they belong. The quote is scrawled in Donald's unmistakable hand. A stunned silence floods the gallery before a low murmur erupts like distant thunder. Trump leans forward, jaw twitching, but Jasmine raises a palm to hold the room. Mary continues, unveiling text messages from January 5th, the eve of the Capitol riot. Draft pardons prepared for every patriot who answers the call tomorrow. She explains how the list ballooned to 1,600 names before sunrise, a mass absolution waiting only for his signature. This wasn't politics, she says, her voice cracking just enough to betray the cost of memory. It was premeditation. The hearing hall seems to contract around her as she shifts from documents to recollection, describing a childhood of locked doors and whispered bargains. She recalls hiding beneath the grand staircase while Donald shouted threats at her father, to late Fred Jr., promising ruin to anyone who defied him. He taught us early that love was weakness, and fear was leverage, she says, and the words land like stones in a still pond, sending ripples through every corner of the room. Trump mutters something sharp, too low for the microphones, but Mary does not pause. You can try to drown me out, she says, voice rising, but you cannot drown the truth. I have lived inside the machinery that built this violence, and I will not be silent while it tears the country apart. Her eyes sweep across the audience, stopping briefly on Jasmine, then back to the man who once loomed over every childhood meal. The gavel rests under Jasmine's fingertips, ready to punctuate the revelation, but the chamber remains caught in the fragile moment between breath and explosion. Mary leans into the mic one final time, her tone a mixture of sorrow and defiance, and delivers the sentence that leaves even the cameras trembling. If blood cannot silence me, what power do you think you still hold? Mary bends to the leather case at her feet, the one that has sat like an unexploded charge since her arrival. With a click that seems to echo off the marble, she lifts the lid and draws out a stack of folders sealed with gold clips and the unmistakable logo of the Trump Organization. The cameras zoom tight as she fans the papers across the evidence table. Quarterly spreadsheets, donor ledgers, wire transfer receipts glowing with numbers that look more like military budgets than campaign accounts. Each page carries a date circled in red: Charlottesville, January 6th, the Kirk assassination matched against a column of donations spiking like heart monitors after a shock. A single sheet bears handwritten note in thick black ink: violence drives engagement drives revenue. Gasps sweep the gallery. Even the stenographer misses a beat as her fingers hover above the keys. Mary keeps her eyes on her uncle while she speaks, each word a controlled incision. These are not coincidences. Every time blood hit the headlines, the money poured in millions within hours. My uncle didn't merely tolerate the chaos. He banked it. She slides the top ledger toward Jasmine, who snatches it like a weapon and strides to the witness table. The microphones catch the snap of paper as she slams it down inches from Trump's hands. Your profits, she says, voice like a blade, were paid in lives. Trump recoils, then leans forward, jaw set, but the tremor in his fingers betrays the effort it takes to keep his mask intact. On the giant screen, analysts project a graph that looks almost obscene. Donation spikes rising in perfect synchrony with acts of violence, each peak labeled with the name of a victim. The audience murmurs as Jasmine flips through receipts showing 8-figure transfers arriving within 24 hours of the Kirk shooting, accompanied by congratulatory emails from top donors. A final slide reveals offshore accounts and encrypted cryptocurrency, wallets linked to shell companies with names like Liberty Futures and Freedom Flame LLC. Each account shows sudden surges, tens of millions immediately following Trump's most incendiary speeches. Trump slams a fist on the table, the sound sharp enough to make a child in the balcony cry out, "Fake, fabricated garbage," he bellows, but his voice cracks under the weight of the evidence glowing 10 feet high behind him. Jasmine steps closer, binder in one hand, the ledger in the other, and meets his eyes with a stare that pins him like a specimen. "Deny the numbers if you dare," she says, her words carrying the quiet menace of absolute certainty. But the money doesn't lie, and neither do the graves. The chamber holds its breath, the silence so dense it feels carved from stone. Viewers across America lean toward their screens, sensing the shift, the first real fracture in a fortress of bravado. Jasmine lets the tension stretch until it trembles, then drives the point home with a question that slices through every defense like a hot wire. Will this mountain of blood-stained profit finally break the cult of invincibility, or will America keep paying the price for his power? The chamber vibrates with a low, electric hum as the evidence screens fade to black and the silence thickens to a breaking point. Trump leans forward first, eyes narrow, voice dripping with contempt. "You're nothing but a loudmouth nobody," he sneers, the syllables cracking like a whip across the marble hall. "A career backbencher who needs my name in her mouth to get a headline. Without me you'd still be hustling for sound bites in some forgotten committee room." The words slither through the air, part insult, part performance, and the red-hatted supporters in the gallery hiss their approval. Jasmine doesn't flinch. She rests both palms on the table, knuckles whitening as she rises slowly, a controlled detonation of poison and fury. Her reply slices back with surgical precision. "Better a nobody than a man who trades democracy for applause." The chamber erupts, half gasps, half cheers until the gavel cracks like a rifle shot to restore order. Trump smirks, but the tick at the corner of his eye betrays a spark of unease. He fires again, louder, voice pitched to reach the cameras. "You're a fraud, Jasmine. You preach about law and order, but you live on smear campaigns. You'd sell your own grandmother for a trending hashtag." Jasmine steps closer, her shadow cutting across the witness table. "I don't need hashtags," she fires back. "I have the numbers, the names, the funerals. What do you have besides excuses and an army of bots?" A reporter in the front row mouths "Damn" as the exchange tightens like a noose. Trump leans in until the microphone catches the scrape of his breath. "You want to talk about funerals? You and your party created the chaos at the border, the crime in our cities, the fear in our suburbs. You built the fire and now you blame me for the smoke." His words pound the room like heavy artillery, each accusation designed to provoke. Jasmine lets a heartbeat pass, then delivers a counterstrike so precise it feels rehearsed by fate. "The smoke we smell tonight," she says, voice low enough to force the microphones to lean in, "comes from the matches you keep striking while counting the donations that follow." The gallery freezes. Trump opens his mouth, closes it, then resorts to a sharp laugh that doesn't reach his eyes. He calls her weak, pathetic. Another puppet on a billionaire's string, but every insult sounds smaller, less certain, as if each word has to claw its way through the gravity of her accusation. The duel stretches past 10 breathless minutes, thrust and parry, insult and counter, to voices sparking off marble until the air tastes of metal and adrenaline. No one in the chamber moves, even the cameras seem to hold their breath, trying to capture the exact second when bravado gives way to truth. Jasmine leans forward for the final cut, her eyes locking on Trump with the steadiness of a surgeon before the decisive incision. "You can shout," she says, each word sharp enough to draw blood, "but shouting will not save you from the reckoning you wrote with your own hand." The room quivers in silence, a nation watching to see who will land the blow America remembers. The monitors flare back to life, replacing spreadsheets and rally reels with human faces that fill the chamber with a different kind of weight. The first feed connects to a modest living room in Salt Lake City, where a Utah mother sits before a webcam, a framed photo of her 21-year-old son balanced on her knees. Her voice trembles, but never breaks. My beau went to hear Charlie Kirk speak about free speech, she says, fingers brushing the glass of the frame. He came home in a coffin. The bullet that killed him was fired by a stranger, but the words that loaded the gun came from here, gasped slide through the gallery like a sudden cold wind. Before she can continue, Trump leans toward his mic, impatience flashing across his face. Sad story, but not my fault, he interrupts, the phrase snapping like a whip in the silence. The mother stiffens as if struck. Even seasoned reporters lower their cameras, caught between professional detachment and raw outrage. Jasmine shoots Trump a look so sharp it could cut steel. Let her finish, she orders, her voice carrying the authority of a gavel. The mother draws a breath, eyes wet but burning. You told them to fight like hell, she says, her words a quiet indictment. Someone listened. The feed cuts to a college student from Wisconsin, recounts barricading a lecture hall door while texts from friends describe gunfire to buildings away. We use desks, backpacks, anything to keep them out, he says, his voice cracking. And while we waited, we heard chants from the hallway. They were quoting the president word for word. A third screen shows a nurse from Arizona whose emergency room treated 3 victims of politically charged attacks in a single night. Every one of them said the shooter shouted a slogan first, she testifies, gripping her stethoscope like a talisman. Jasmine lets each story settle like stones dropped into a dark lake, ripples of grief and fury filling the room. These are not statistics, she says, her voice low but carrying to the rafters. These are Americans who believed their leaders more than their neighbors and paid for it in blood. Trump rolls his eyes, muttering something about media puppets, but the microphones catch the contempt and the gallery answers with an audible hiss. The Udo mother reappears on the screen, leaning forward as if she can see straight into the chamber. Mr. Trump, she says, you may never touch a trigger, but you handed the shooter the words. The silence that follows is so complete it feels alive, a national heartbeat waiting for the next sound. Jasmine turns to the cameras, her gaze sweeping millions of homes where candles flicker beside television screens, and asks the question that cuts deeper than any insult. Can empathy outgun indifference before another parent buries a child? The chamber darkens again, the giant monitor blooming to life with a sterile FBI logo that glows like a warning flare. A senior agent steps forward carrying a small black speaker seal in an evidence bag, its surface scuffed as if it has traveled through a war zone. This is the recover audio from the suspect's encrypted device, the agent announces, voice flat but taut with urgency. The first crackle of static swallows the room. Then a male voice, young, breathless, unmistakably alive, bleeds through the hiss. I'm doing this for President Trump. He said we have to fight like hell. Tonight I fight. The words slice the air like shrapnel. A collective gasp erupts from the gallery, followed by the mechanical whir of cameras snapping to capture the moment. Trump jerks upright, face flushing crimson. Fabrication, he bellows, the word exploding across the marble chamber. This is fake deepfake garbage cooked up by Democrats. His fist slams the table, rattling the microphone until the feedback screeches like a siren. But the FBI agent doesn't flinch. With the calm of a surgeon, she clicks a remote and another slide appears. Waveform graphs, spectrographic analysis, digital fingerprints, all confirming the recording's authenticity. Voice matching is conclusive, she says. Probability of manipulation, less than 1 in a billion. The data pulses on the screen like a heartbeat that refuses to be silenced. Jasmine leans forward, eyes locked on Trump. You can shout fake until your lungs give out, she says, voice slicing through the tension. But science does not bend to your slogans. The agent cues another segment. The same voice continues, trembling with adrenaline. He told us the enemy is everywhere. If I don't act now, America is lost. The sentence hangs in the chamber like smoke after gunfire. A mother in the audience presses a hand to her mouth. A veteran tightens his grip on the flag in his lap. Outside the building, sirens wail in eerie harmony with the recorded breathing of a killer. Trump pounds the table again, his defiance cracking into something closer to desperation. You can't prove context, he shouts. Words are just words. Jasmine seizes the opening, rising to her feet with the binder of financial records still in hand. Words are never just words, she fires back, every syllable a hammer. They are sparks, and tonight America is counting the bodies left in their smoke. The agent plays the final seconds, a chilling laugh, a chambering of a round. Dense silence broken only by the killer's last whisper. For Trump, the echo lingers long after the audio stops, a ghost of intent no denial can erase. The gallery sits frozen, breath held as if the next inhale might ignite the room itself. Jasmine fixes the camera, the gaze that travels through every screen in America and delivers the question that now throbs in the nation's veins. Is denial stronger than a smoking gun, or will we finally admit the bullet was fired the moment the words were spoken? The chamber lights blaze to full intensity, bathing every face in the harsh glow of reckoning. Jasmine rises from her chair and places a velvet-covered case on the evidence table, the sound of the latch snapping open echoing like a starter pistol. From within she lifts a gavel unlike any ever seen in Congress, heavy, dark steel polished to a mirror shine, the handle engraved with 73 names of victims etched so finely, a shimmer under the floodlights. Reporters crane forward as the cameras zoom tight, capturing the silent roll of letters. Students, nurses, police officers, a child barely 8 years old. This, Jasmine declares, raising the object high enough for the galleries and every watching home to see, is the hammer of truth, and tonight it will strike with the weight of every life stolen by political violence. A murmur surges through the room, half prayer, half thunder. She sets the gavel on the dais and pulls a tablet from her binder, its screen already glowing with a real-time interface. Justice should not wait for closed-door deals, she says, voice gaining force with every word. So tonight, America decides with us. A QR code flashes across the giant monitor, bright and undeniable. Within seconds, the hearing's live feed is flooded with millions of phones scanning in unison, the faint electronic chime of logins ringing like a digital chorus. A banner updates in real time. 2 million participants. 3,800,000. 5 million numbers climbing so fast the counter struggles to keep pace. Hashtags detonate across the internet. Hashtag hammer of truth. Hashtag vote for justice. Hashtag America counts, turning the hearing into the most watched broadcast in the world. Trump shifts in his seat, jaw tightening as he watches the counter leap into 8 digits. This is a stunt, he scoffs, but the strain in his voice betrays the tremor beneath the bravado. Jasmine ignores him, eyes fixed on the swelling tally. Each of you watching, she continues, gaze piercing the cameras, has the power to demand accountability. Every vote tonight is a strike of this hammer. Every name you enter is a promise that the dead will not be forgotten. The gallery erupts as staffers read live comments scrolling beneath the poll, parents of victims pleading for action, veterans warning of more blood if nothing changes, teenagers typing furious demands for consequences. A bell chimes from the tablet, signaling the first milestone, 10 million votes in under 5 minutes, a digital roar that seems to shake the very marble beneath their feet. Jasmine lifts the hammer of truth above her head, its engraved names catching the light like sparks. America, she says, voice steady but charged with the electricity of a nation awake, your countdown has begun. Every second you hesitate is another second violence claims its next victim. Cast your strike, make it count, let the world hear the sound of a country that will not be silent. She brings the gavel down once, the thunderclap reverberating through the chamber and across millions of screens, and asks the question now burning through every living room and protest line. What happens when justice goes viral and the people themselves become the jury? The live poll counter on the giant screen spins like a hurricane. 15 million, 22 million, 27 million votes and climbing, but Jasmine doesn't wait for the final tally. She grips the hammer of truth with both hands and steps to the center of the dais, the chamber lights sharpening to a cold white that makes every face red like a confession. The first blow falls without warning, a steel crack that rattles a marble and jolts cameras on their tripods. Incitement of political violence, she declares, voice ringing like a verdict across the rotunda. The gavel's echo rolls through the chamber and out into the streets, where protesters freeze mid-chant, as if the sound itself commands silence. Trump jerks in his seat, shoulders stiffening against the invisible force of a nation's judgment. Before the reverberation fades, Jasmine raises the gavel again. Pardoning of rioters, the second strike lands harder, a booming concussion that seems to shake dust from the rafters. Screens flash with side-by-side images. January 6th rioters breaching the Capitol, presidential pardon papers signed in looping black ink. Reporters gasp as the sound travels beyond the chamber, feeding directly into the millions of phones still tuned to the live vote. Trump's hand twitches toward the microphone, but he stops when he notices the counter jump another 3 million in a single breath. Jasmine draws a deliberate inhale, eyes locked on the man across from her. And the third, profiting from hate, she brings the hammer down with a final, bone-deep crash that reverberates like distant artillery. A spray of camera flashes ignites the room. Even seasoned correspondents flinch as if the strike has physical weight. The screen behind her explodes with the incriminating graphs Mary Trump unveiled earlier: donation spikes after violent incidents, crypto transfers to shadow accounts, handwritten notes about violence driving engagement. The numbers glow red as sirens wail faintly outside, merging reality with the spectacle inside. Trump tries to laugh, but the sound fractures mid-breath, a brittle nose swallowed by the lingering echo of the third strike. He leans forward, mouth forming a retort, but the crowd's roar drowns him out. Chants of justice, justice, rise from the gallery and the streets beyond, a living chorus that swells until even the microphones distort. Jasmine stands unmoving, the gavel resting against her shoulder like the blade of an executioner, her gaze steady on the cameras that beam every second into homes across America. She lowers the hammer of truth onto the table with a soft final click, a sound almost intimate after the thunder, and speaks directly to the millions still voting online. These strikes are not theater, she says, each word carrying the gravity of stone. They are the sound of a nation refusing to be ruled by fear. Her eyes lock on Trump one last time, voice cutting through the roar with the precision of a scalpel. Will the sound of justice drown the roar of propaganda, or will America allow the nose to swallow the truth? The echo of the third strike still trembles in the marble when Trump suddenly shoves back his chair, the scrape of metal on stone loud enough to slice through the chance. He stands with a jerky, almost desperate motion and makes for the side exit, suit jacket flaring like a black flag. Security moves as a single organism for agents stepped into his path, palms raised, eyes unreadable, cameras pivot in a frenzy. The gallery surges to its feet, and a single word rises from the crowd and multiplies until it becomes a thunderclap. Truth, truth, truth. The chant rolls down the corridors and into the streets, a living tide of sound that drowns the hum of electronics and rattles the chandeliers above their heads. Trump spins back toward the dais, face flushed a dangerous crimson, and jabs a trembling finger at Jasmine. "This is a witch hunt on steroids," he shouts, the microphone catching the crack in his voice despite the sheer volume. "A circus of liars, a disgrace to this country. You think you can scare me with your phony hammers and fake numbers? I built this nation, you're nothing but parasites feeding off my name." Spittle flashes in the camera lights, aides hover at the edge of the frame, frozen between the instinct to protect and the fear of being crushed in the spectacle. Jasmine remains seated, the hammer of truth resting calmly across her lap, the engraved names gleaming like a silent jury. When she finally rises, the movement is deliberate, almost regal, and the room quiets under an invisible weight. Her voice cuts through the chants with a steadiness that feels more dangerous than any shout. "No, Mr. Trump," she says, every syllable sharp as a blade drawn across stone. "This is not a witch hunt. This is America waking up." The words land like a verdict, and for the first time the former president's eyes flick toward the exit, as though measuring the distance to freedom. The crowd senses the shift and presses forward, chants swelling into a single relentless heartbeat. A reporter in the front row mounts, "I got," as the poll counter behind Jasmine explodes past 30 million votes, each number a digital hammer striking in perfect rhythm with the crowd. Trump tries to speak again, but the roar of truth surges over him, erasing his words before they form. He pounds the podium with a clenched fist, yet every blow sounds small against the thunder rolling back from the people he once commanded. Jasmine steps closer, the gavel raised not as a threat but as an emblem, her eyes locking on the cameras that carry this confrontation to every corner of the nation. "Tower built on fear always ends the same way," she says, her voice low but impossible to ignore. "It shrinks before the very people it sought to control." The chamber holds its breath, millions watching for the single telltale flicker that betrays a fallen titan. And the question ripples outward like a seismic wave. Is this the moment the strong man finally looks small, or merely the second before he breaks? Outside the Capitol, the night itself seems alive, a restless organism lit by thousands of flickering candles and the harsh glare of riot lights. On the west lawn, a river of mourners stretches from the reflecting pool to Constitution Avenue, their vigil a quiet defiance of the chaos inside. Across the barricades a wall of MAGA flags snaps like gunfire in the cold wind, chants of "Stop the Witch Hunt," clashing with the steady murmur of prayers. Between the two camps stands a double cordon of National Guard troops, their shields reflecting both flame and neon, as though the country's soul has been split into mirror images. Helicopter rotors beat overhead, scattering ash from the candle smoke like phantom snow. Far beyond Washington, the shockwaves detonate city by city. In Times Square, giant screens replay Jasmine's 3 strikes in a relentless loop, while rival crowds collide beneath the electric billboards. Fists fly, sirens wail, and mounted police push back a surge of protesters chanting truth. Until the pavement is slick with rain and pepper spray, Chicago's loop becomes a chessboard of barricades and broken umbrellas as counter-protesters flood the bridges, their voices echoing off the river like rolling thunder. In Dallas, a candlelight march along Main Street fractures into chaos when masked agitators hurl smoke bombs, the acrid fog swallowing Christmas lights and leaving nothing but silhouettes grappling in the haze. Social feeds ignite in real time, a digital wildfire leaping from phone to phone. Videos of the clashes stream alongside the live vote counter from the Capitol. 35 million, 38 million, 40 million participants, each new number sparking fresh eruptions in city after city. Cable networks scramble split screens of Jasmine's steady face and the growing unrest outside, pundits arguing whether the nation is witnessing a rebirth of democracy or the first tremors of something far darker. Hospitals from Philadelphia to Phoenix report spikes in injuries as marches stretch into the small hours, their dashboards glowing red like a nationwide alarm. Back in Washington, the sound of dueling crowds seeps through the Capitol's stone walls, one side singing hymns, the other chanting Trump's name in a bass line of fury. Jasmine pauses mid-question as the roar reaches the chamber, her eyes flicking toward the sealed windows as if she can feel the country straining at the seams. Trump sits rigid, lips pressed thin, the chants of his supporters bleeding through the walls like the echo of a storm he can no longer control. Reporters trade glances over their screens, each wondering if they are chronicling a turning point or the spark of something uncontainable. The night smells of wax, sweat, and the sharp tang of imminent violence. Police radios crackle with calls for reinforcements, but the sound is almost drowned by the rising tide of voices demanding answers louder than sirens can suppress. As the camera pans across the Capitol steps, capturing the collision of prayer and rage, one question crackles through every speaker and smartphone like an electrical surge: will tonight ignite a movement that heals a nation, or a civil storm that tears it apart? The hearing breaks for a short recess, but the tension clings to Jasmine like a second skin. She steps into the narrow anteroom behind the chamber, a place meant for quick coffee and whispered strategy, now lit only by the faint blue pulse of her phone. Messages stack on the screen faster than she can swipe dozens, then hundreds voicemails packed with static and rage. One voice hisses, "We know where you live," another spits slurs between bursts of distorted laughter. The automated counter keeps climbing. 327 new messages. 349, 372, a flood of venom disguised as freedom of speech. Jasmine's hands tighten around the phone until her knuckles blanch, but she forces herself to breathe, each inhale a fight against the acid taste of fear. She dials her mother in Dallas, the number she has known since childhood, and waits through 3 long rings that feel like a lifetime. "Debbie," her mother answers, voice warm but trembling, already aware of the storm swirling through every news channel. Jasmine closes her eyes and lets the sound of home steady her heartbeat. They speak in fragments: "I'm safe. Don't watch the feeds. Yes, the threats are real." Each sentence a fragile bridge across the miles. Her mother whispers scripture, the same passage she recited before Jasmine's first campaign debate. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." The words land like a shield over a wound that refuses to close. Outside the door, aides confer in hushed tones while the distant roar of the crowd seeps through the stone walls. Jasmine glances at a security report slid under the door moments earlier. Addresses of her staffers posted online. Photographs of her car circulating on extremist forums. She pictures her mother alone in their modest house, curtains drawn, and feels the old ache of responsibility sharpen into something almost unbearable. For a heartbeat she imagines walking away, closing the binder, turning off the lights, choosing safety over sacrifice, The thought flickers and dies. She lowers her head, resting her forehead against the cool plaster wall, and whispers a prayer so soft it barely stirs the air. Protect them. Protect us. Give me strength to finish this. The words steady her spine like steel rods. She slips the phone back into her pocket, straightens her jacket, and checks the Gattle's reflection in the polished table, a small, silent reminder of the names she carries into battle. When the door opens, the noise from the chamber crashes back in like a tidal wave chants. Camera shudders, the restless heartbeat of a nation deciding its future. Jasmine steps toward it without hesitation, the weight of threats and family and country balanced on her shoulders, and walks back into the storm. As the cameras swing to capture her return, one question hums through every screen and every watching heart. How much sacrifice can one fighter endure for the greater good before the cost becomes unbearable? The double doors swing open and the chamber erupts as if a pressure valve has burst. Jasmine strides back inside, the hammer of truth tucked beneath her arm like a banner of defiance, her silhouette framed by the white-hot lights that catch every shard of determination in her eyes. Outside, giant LED screens broadcast her entrance to a crowd that stretches across the National Mall. The instant she appears, a roar rises from the candlelit vigil and ricochets off the marble facade. Phones flash in unison, a galaxy of small lights signaling a single message: we are with you. Inside, the chants roll down from the balconies: justice, justice. Until the walls tremble and even the guards glance upward as if the building itself might lift from the force of the sound. Jasmine does not wave. She walks the aisle with the calm of a soldier returning to the front, each step deliberate, measured, defying the threats still buzzing in her phone. When she reaches the day, she places the gavel on the table and raises the tablet connected to the lev pole. A new feature glows across the screen: the pledge, a nationwide vow to reject political violence and defend democratic norms. Tonight, she announces, her voice cutting through the din like a bell, America speaks not only with votes, but with promises. Sign this pledge, and strike a blow for peace. Kirk codes flash across every monitor. Within seconds, signatures pour in at a staggering rate: 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, and climbing, each name a digital heartbeat of collective courage. Trump watches in silence, jaw tight, as the numbers surge higher than any rally he ever commanded. Jasmine lifts the hammer of truth once more, its engraved names glinting under the cameras. This is how a nation heals, she says, her words steady as stone. Not by fear, not by blood, but by millions choosing to stand together. The roar from inside and outside merges into a single unstoppable wave, a sound that feels less like applause than the birth of a new covenant. And as the signatures multiply across the country, the question reverberates from every screen like a challenge to history itself: can collective action rewrite a violent chapter of American history before another life is lost? Dawn breaks over Washington like a camera flash, harsh, sudden, impossible to ignore. Cable networks flood the airwaves with fresh numbers that hit harder than any gavel. Overnight polling shows Donald Trump's favorability among independent voters has collapsed by 12 full points, the sharpest single-day drop ever recorded in modern political history. Anchors call it the gavel shock, their voices vibrating with the thrill of witnessing a tectonic shift. Chirons scream Trump freefall as maps light up in angry red and cautious blue, each percentage point a fracture, a once impregnable wall of support. Across the country, coffee shops and commuter trains buzz with the statistics. In Atlanta, morning commuters freeze if her station monitors replaying the 3 thunderous strikes of Jasmine's hammer of truth. In a Milwaukee diner, a retired steelworker reads the poll on his phone and whispers to no one in particular, "That's bigger than Watergate's first week." Wall Street opens to a jittery slide as analysts warn of democracy risk driving sudden market tremors. Social feeds throb with hashtags: hashtag gavel shock, hashtag truthquake, hashtag hammer effect dash, as millions of Americans dissect the meaning of a number that feels more like a national verdict than a data point. Commentators across networks scramble to name the moment. A conservative strategist calls a moral indictment louder than any subpoena. A progressive host dubs at the night America fired its first shot back. Even foreign outlets break from election coverage to broadcast the poll's jagged graphs, interpreting the plunge as proof that a country long paralyzed by partisanship has found a pressure valve in collective outrage. Inside the Capitol, Staffers swap texts showing live dashboards of the ongoing public pledge now surpassing 25 million signatures and wonder aloud whether Congress will dare to ignore a moral tide so visible it glows from space. Jasmine arrives for the morning session flanked by aides who carried the hammer of truth like a sacred relic. Reporters swarm the hallway, shouting questions about legislation and next steps, but she simply raises the gavel once, letting the engraved names catch the flashbulbs, and moves silently toward the chamber. The nation watches, breath held between disbelief and dawning recognition. No judge has issued a ruling, no jury has filed into a box, yet the numbers scroll across every screen like a binding decree. As the morning sun washes the Capitol dome in unforgiving light, one question cuts through pundit chatter and partisan spin to lodge in the mind of every American. Is this moral verdict rendered by millions overnight stronger than any courtroom ruling could ever be? By mid-afternoon, the Capitol has shed its night of chaos, but not its tension. Reporters pack the press gallery as the Speaker's gavel calls a surprise joint session to order, the air charged with the metallic scent of coming change. Screens across the chamber flash with the title The Digital Responsibility Act, a bipartisan bill drafted in secret overnight and unveiled with the speed of an emergency evacuation. Its core provision targets the hidden algorithms that reward rage-forcing tech giants to reveal the code that amplifies hate and to pay steep penalties when violence follows the clicks. Gasps ripple through the chamber as the clerk reads the penalties aloud. Fines in the billions, criminal exposure for executives who ignore red flag warnings, mandatory shutdowns of repeat offender networks. Even seasoned lobbyists blanch, their whispered calculations drowned by the roar of approval from the public gallery. Jasmine steps to the podium, the hammer of truth resting beside her like a silent witness. Laws alone can't heal hearts, she begins, her voice steady but laced with the fatigue of battle, but they can stop the bleeding. Her words carry beyond the chamber, picked up by live feeds in coffee shops, factories, and crowded subway cars, where millions watch with the intensity of a nation taking its first collective breath. This bill, she continues, will not cure hate, it will not teach empathy, but it will strip profit from the violence merchants and give democracy the oxygen it needs to fight another day. Across the aisle, lawmakers who rarely share a handshake now nod in cautious agreement, their faces etched with the realization that political survival demands moral action. Outside, the crowd erupts as the announcement spreads, pledge signatures soaring past 30 million within minutes. Jasmine lifts the gavel high, the engraved names catching the camera lights like a constellation of the lost, and delivers a final challenge that echoes across the chamber and through every device streaming the session. Will policy follow courage, or will courage be forced to stand alone? The chamber falls into a hush so complete it feels almost supernatural, a silence thick enough to muffle the restless crowd outside, and the relentless beeping of the lev poll counter still flashing in red. Jasmine Crockett rises from her seat and steps to the center podium, the hammer of truth balanced in both hands like a sacred relic. Behind her, the screen still glows with the overnight numbers double-digit drops in Trump's favorability. 35 million pledges against political violence, a nation's verdict rendered without a single judge. She looks into the cameras as if staring through the glass and into every living room, every diner, every subway car holding its breath. Her voice begins low, the tone of a confidant, but each word sharpens into a blade of resolve. Freedom of speech is sacred, she says, the phrase echoing across the marble like a hymn. But when speech becomes a trigger, silence is complicity. Justice survives only when defended by all of us. She lets the sentence linger until the room seems to tilt toward her, then continues, her eyes glistening with the fatigue of the fight and the fire that keeps her standing. Tonight the people proved that courage is louder than cruelty. You teachers, nurses, veterans, mothers, students chose truth over fear. Your signatures, your votes, your voices have already saved lives we will never know by name. A tremor of applause swells and breaks, rolling over the chamber like a tide, but Jasmine lifts a hand and the sound stills in an instant. Do not mistake this for an ending, she warns. Laws can be repealed, numbers can fade. The only safeguard is you, waking up every morning and choosing to defend what we almost lost. She raises the gavel one last time, the engraved names catching the white lights in a final flash that feels like sunrise after a long siege. The fight for democracy, she says, is not a story to watch. It is a duty to carry. Her gaze pierces the lens, reaching the solitary viewer on a dark couch and the roaring crowds in the streets alike, and her closing challenge lands like a spark in dry timber. Will you defend it with me? The lesson of this story is that truth is not a spectator sport. It demands courage from ordinary people, not just leaders in a chamber. Jasmine's stand reminds us that hateful words become dangerous only when the rest of us choose silence, and that every small action, speaking up, voting, refusing to spread lies, shapes the future more than any single headline. Justice survives only when defended daily, in conversations, workplaces, and communities. What step will you take today, big or small, to defend truth and protect those who cannot fight alone? Your answer is part of the verdict that writes tomorrow's history. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.